Good evening, everyone. It is May 15th, 2023 still. It is 7:06 p.m. My name is David Patty. I'm the Stayton City Council President, and I will be chairing tonight's meeting. First of all, we'll go ahead and call to order, 7:06. Next, please join me for a flag salute. Okay, next item is going to be announcements for tonight's regular session meeting. Any additions to the agenda? Okay, not even from staff. All right. So any declarations of ex parte contacts, conflict of interest, bias, etc.? All right. If you don't have one, I do, but I'm going to wait till the public hearing if that's okay with Dan. Cool. Getting the thumbs up, so I guess it is. Item number 4 is next, and that's going to be appointments. We don't have any. The next thing is going to be public comment, and I'm hoping that maybe we have some folks out there who are wishing to speak to the Stayton City Council this fine evening. And hearing none, we'll go ahead and move on to presentations. Consent agenda, forgive me. Would anyone like to offer up a motion on the consent agenda?
I will move to I forget the way to do it though. I move to adopt the consent agenda as presented.
Okay, we have a motion to adopt the consent agenda as presented. Do we have a second?
I second that.
All right, Councilor Giglio made a motion and Councilor Sims seconds to accept the consent agenda. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Okay. Go ahead and move past that one. That's going to be 4-0, Tammy. Okay, cool. Next we have, and I tried to jump to this because I was so excited, presentations on Shaft Road and Golf Club Road roundabout from Caleb Cox, Kittleson and Associates.
And before Lance introduces them, I was asked by Tammy to ask Councilor Sims to scooch this way just a little bit because you're not on camera. Thank you.
We're all rectified there then. Let's go ahead and move on to Mr. Lance here.
All right. Thank you, Councilor Patty. I didn't know how to recognize you actually, other than David or Councilor Patty. Thank you, Councilor Patty. Good evening, councilors. Tonight we do have an update for the roundabout. I just want to do a brief rundown of this because not all of you have been here since when we started the roundabout project. We started that in 2020. And obviously it's at the intersection of Golf Club Road and Shaft Road. And it's a very important piece to the development of the Stayton industrial area. From the very beginning of this project, we knew there are certain things about this that were going to be difficult. But 4 things that we knew were the citizens preferred the roundabout versus a traffic signal. We wanted to get this designed and shovel ready just in case we could obtain state and federal dollars after the pandemic. We also knew it had very high groundwater in the area, so it was going to be very difficult to design something, which is going to take some time. And 4, we knew that this system was we knew that this intersection was needed to be completed so we could promote our economic development plan down in the industrial area. And so we knew that going into this project. One of the reasons we wanted to get it done so we could start promoting Stayton as an economic development viable place to come with your business. And so the design team took off. We hired Kittleson and Associates to design the roundabout, and they pretty much started that in January 21. We all knew what the issues were that were existing prior to but we didn't know the extent of them until we started designing. Since then, we've worked with the Corps of Engineers, the Division of State Lands, the Department of Fish and Wildlife, the National Marine Fisheries Services, NIMS, and Pacific Power to try to get a design up and running. The project team has been working nonstop to get these plans shovel ready. And we have been working through a variety of obstacles to get this. And tonight, I wanted to bring forward Kittleson to give us an update where we are at. It was 1 year ago tonight, or in March, we had an update as well. So I figured I wanted to get them in front of you, let them know where we're at, let you know where we're at. And if you have any questions for Kittleson or myself, tonight would be a great time to ask. So with that, I'll introduce Caleb. He is a project engineer for Kittleson, and he is one of the lead engineers on this project. Caleb,
Hi,
you're on.
everyone. Can you confirm you can hear me all right?
We can hear you.
All right. Thank you, Lance, for the screen. Oh, it looks like it's telling me the host has disabled screen sharing. Is there any way to update that?
We are working on that.
All right. Thank you.
Oops.
Oh.
Guess I don't know how to do that. Jana? We'll get there.
All right. No problem.
While they're trying to work that out, I just want to let you know, we have a number of consultants working on this project. It's just not Kittleson. We have a stormwater consultant, which is Keller Associates. We have environmental scientists, which is Pacific Habitat Services. We've got Marion County that sits on our design meeting. So we have a wealth of information and design experience that sits on this design team besides myself, city engineer, we've got Marion County engineer, county engineer. And so we've got a pretty well-rounded team. It's just that our site down here in Shaft Road and Golf Club, it's just so difficult. And I think Caleb's going to share some of that with you now.
Is he able to share now, Tammy?
You should be able to.
You able to share now?
Oh, I'll give it a try. It looks like it's working.
Boy, I hope so, because I didn't.
How's that?
No. Oh, there we go. There we go.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. It's great to be with you. As Lance mentioned, my name is Caleb Cox. I'm a roadway engineer for Kittleson Associates. And I am here to talk about the Shaft Road project and give you an update on where we're at. Some of this might be a little bit of overlap with what Lance just mentioned to you. But just to give background on the project, this was a design that was originally included in the city of Stayton transportation system plan in 2018. In that, the traffic analysis that was done as part of the transportation system plan found that the current intersection of South Road and Loco Golf Club Road meets warrants for some sort of upgraded intersection control. As part of that, they found that the existing delay at the intersection falls under something that we call a level of service D. Level of service is a term we use in traffic engineering to determine or to talk about how the intersection runs on a rating system. And the city of Stayton uses level of service D as the minimum threshold for kind of operation and traffic congestion at an intersection. So the intersection is operating as a stop with stop signs on all four lanes today at a level of service D. In the future, the delay at the intersection is projected to increase, but still through the next 20 years or so, continue to operate at that level of service D according to the TSP. That said, there's been some additional projects that have been done in the area that are bringing more traffic. And then, as Lance mentioned, there's also some land to the west of the intersection that the city is hoping to encourage for development. And ultimately, in the 2018 TSC, roundabout design was identified as the preferred alternative. So that's where we jumped in. Like Lance mentioned in early 2021, jumped in to start on the design, and then just a little note here about project funding. The design is funded by the city. The actual dollars for construction are not identified yet, but Lance and Julia at the city are working hard to identify that funding through some national grant opportunities.
Lance, real quick, if I may, I do have a question for Caleb. Do I have your name right? I'm sorry.
That's
Okay,
Yeah, that's
good.
correct.
Sorry. Well, hey, Caleb, this is Counselor Patty. I had a real quick question before you get too far away from it. You mentioned something about a metric of 90th percentile for crash frequency at that intersection. Could you just tell me, is that other intersections in the state, in Stayton? Like, what are we talking about here?
Yeah, it's based on other intersections of a similar type in the state. So the state of Oregon has a statewide crash database that kind of records types and frequencies of crashes at different intersections. And when you compare this intersection to others around the state, it has a higher frequency, and it's a frequency that's above the 90th percentile.
Thank you so much for expanding that definition. I appreciate it.
Of course. And feel free to jump in with any other questions. All right. So that gets us to starting the design in early 2021. So there's a number of things that we worked through, primarily in 2021, is kind of spilling into 2022 as well. A lot of preliminary studies. We did a site survey of the area, a geotechnical analysis, hazardous materials assessment, traffic analysis, wetland delineation, and stormwater. Kind of all of the early study activities that are required to just kind of set the basis for the design of a project like this. Through that, then we laid out our first roundabout concept, which I'll pull up on the screen here in just a minute. We also did some street lighting design, kind of at a preliminary level, landscape. And then another thing that I'll talk about a little bit in a minute is the roundabout field test. And some of you may have heard about this. It occurred last summer. And I'll explain a little bit more about what that was on the next couple slides. And then another piece here is just coordination with adjacent development projects. So there's actually development under construction right now in the northwest quadrant of the intersection, the Shaft Square apartments that are going in. So through that, they're doing some work on the range adjacent to their properties. We've been working with them to make sure the design ties in. So in April of 2022, about a year ago, our 30% done design, what we call concept design package, was completed. And that has had a basis for a lot of what we've been working through, like Lance mentioned, with key environmental stormwater challenges that we're working through.
And Kalen, let me interrupt there. I want to show that top bullet point is very important. We knew all along that the city wouldn't be able to pay for the construction of this roundabout. So we went into it knowing that we'd be looking for state, federal, county help to build it. And in order to do that, you have to follow a certain protocols to get that state and federal funding. And that's why we did the hazmat. That's why we did the wetland delineation. There was a numerous things that we had to go through just to meet that federal protocol so we could get federal money. And in this case, one could make the argument that it actually hurt us, but we have our feelers out now with the federal government to try to get money for it, and there'd be no other way to get federal dollars if we had not done these certain tasks. So with that, Caleb, go ahead.
Yep, thanks for chiming in on that. So this is our roundabout concept. And let's see, can you all see my mouse here on the screen?
Yeah.
I think you should be able to. Okay, great. So it's single lane roundabout all around. It's about 150 feet in diameter. So you can see in the background aerial image, it's kind of faded back, but it's much bigger than the existing intersection. And then we've got, a truck apron to make sure large trucks can get around. Sidewalks around it, bike facilities, pedestrian crossings. Kind of an effort to just not only install
Counselor Patty.
Go ahead, Counselor Ord.
Caleb, I had a question for you about the design. So, and maybe you'll get this when you do the talk about the rodeo. I have had several people come to me with concerns. I don't believe that they drive trucks, but they are concerned about truck traffic and farm equipment. It was cited that there's been issues with roundabouts in Bend, that they're breaking, they're not working correctly. So I just wanted to see if you might be able to speak to that a little bit and if those things are taken into consideration with this construction.
Caleb, I'll start. We did do the truck rodeo last summer, and he's going to show you that, but we had full-size farm equipment come through. We had no problems with them. We had a 110-foot truck, an extended truck, drive around. We probably had every specific type of vehicle you'll ever see here in Stayton go through our roundabout that we painted on the ground. We had sandbags out there, but Caleb will show more and he can talk about it more. But we did hear those same complaints or arguments or concerns. And so we invited everybody down in the industrial area and farmers in the outskirts to come and drive their vehicles through it. And that's everything from a combine to sprayers to road graders to snow plows. And they came and they drove through the roundabout, and there was a couple areas where they would clip a sandbag, and we modified our design in those areas so we would accommodate all vehicles around Stayton. And with that, go ahead, Caleb. You can elaborate more on that if you'd like.
Yeah, sounds great. Yeah, it's a great question. It's definitely a question that we see come up quite often, especially in communities where there aren't a lot of roundabouts. But yeah, the truck rodeo or the truck field test that we did is a great tool for two reasons. It is great to hopefully engage folks from the community who drive large vehicles to come out and take a test drive through and see how it might work. And then it's great for the design team too to kind of see any and every vehicle that might be driving through it, take an actual test drive through. So, we analyze this on the computer as best as we can, but there's no substitute for seeing the actual trucks drive through in real life. So I got a couple quick slides here just to kind of update you all on what we did for the field test. It's a little tough to see, but this was a picture taken with a drone from above after the roundabout was laid out in the gravel parking lot just south of the intersection. So you can see there's cones on the ground, and then we kind of connected them. Lance and his crew did a great job laying these out, striking out the roundabout. And this is the actual design that laid out in this gravel parking lot. So your points were surveyed and measured correctly. And then you can see the circle is right in this area.
Yeah, we went out and surveyed that, and we got the points from Caleb. Our surveyors went out and surveyed the exact same measurements of what they're designing out in it's at the bus barn parking lot. So we went out and staked the exact roundabout that they're designing out there, and then we invited folks out to drive it. Go ahead, Caleb.
Yeah, and then we also put together a video of one of the test vehicles going through, so I won't show that in this presentation today, but I've left a link down here, and I'm sure Lance would be happy to pass it along to you all. It's about a 5 to 6 minute video. But I do have a couple of pictures from the event. This is one of the large freight trucks going through the roundabout here. And then the last one here is the truck that Lance referenced. We had it was just over 100 feet on this truck and trailer here. The trailer actually extends out an additional 30 feet from its normal length. So this is one of the biggest vehicles I've seen go through a roundabout in person. And like Lance mentioned, he was able to make it with the exception of a slight clip of the sandbags right here. So our solution is just to shrink the central island by a few feet, and that's going to allow this oversized vehicle to travel.
Yeah, it's important to realize those are buses. They're just to the north or the north side of the picture. So you know how long school buses are. You could probably put 2 school buses in the length of that vehicle there.
Yeah, this is an extremely oversized vehicle. Being out there talking to this truck driver, he said there's only 2 truck stops along the entire length of I-5 between here and California that he's able to fit into when he's hauling a load. All right, so that brings us to some of the challenges of this project. So a couple of things. First, we'll talk about stormwater and then jump to the environmental issues that we've identified. On the stormwater side, like Lance mentioned earlier, the intersection that we're looking at here is a roadway for the city, being a lot of draining right to this location. You saw in earlier graphics, there's a 48-inch storm line main under the road that outfalls into the ditch. So there's a lot of water coming here. That creates some challenges. In addition, high water table, so there's not a lot of opportunity for just straight infiltration of the water into the ground. It has to get piped out or flow out through a ditch to get it out of the area. The other challenge is that the connection between the roundabout and the ultimate outfall of the stormwater at the Salem ditch is very flat. There's not a whole lot of slope to work with to get the water to flow. So we've worked through a number of alternatives to this, looking at larger ditches, pipes, culverts, different things. Ultimately, the solution that we've identified as the kind of best option at this point is a 3x8-foot reinforced box culvert that runs the length of Shaft Road between the Gulf Cliff intersection and the Salem ditch. It's about 1,500 feet. And this will serve the city's stormwater needs well in the future. Our stormwater team that we've been working with has done a lot of analysis to look at this and make sure that it's going to be a significant resource for the city for a number of years. So on the environmental side, wetlands were identified on both the north and south side of the Shaft Road. Wetlands can be a challenge because those wetlands are protected. Impacts to wetland areas be mitigated, whether it's through additional projects from the city to construct wetlands, or there are other ways to mitigate it as well. The other issue is that the roadside ditch, which was identified as a wetland, is also hydraulically connected, meaning that there's a continuous flow of water from the ditch to the. And when I say ditch, I'm talking about the Shaft Road ditch right here, and then the Salem ditch is what the canal is called over to the west that runs north-south. So those two are connected, especially in high flow events. So unfortunately, the fish biologists found fish species that are protected by the Environmental Protection Act, the Endangered Species Act. So the result is this brings a lot of other federal agencies to the table who have a stake in these issues. So we've been working with, like Lance mentioned, we've been working with the Army Corps, Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, National Range Fisheries Service, and that's been a big part of what we've been working on the last 9 months to a year. It's just the coordination back and forth with them. You can imagine with our agencies like that, response times are delayed. Ultimately, we just a couple months ago met with Fish and Wildlife on site, and after working through a number of different options and alternatives, we've come up with a mitigation project for the fish habitat at another location in the city that I'll show you in a little bit. The issue with having fish in this ditch is that if we build a roundabout and that removes viable fish habitat, so the agencies will require you to create new fish habitat somewhere else within the basin. So this is a solution we're looking at. Sorry, just some of the questions.
No, Kayla, let me just speak that a little bit. I do want to point out, and I meant to do this earlier, that early on, we knew the roundabout, just the footprint of the roundabout, how big it was with the run-ins and the run-outs into the roundabout. It was a pretty decent-sized footprint. And so we started running into these problems with the wetlands. We had the delineation done. We're like, wow, we're getting into wetlands. We don't really want to get there. So I had Kittleson also build a footprint for if we had to put a signal there instead, right? Instead of the roundabout, to see if it would limit the mitigation efforts that we had to do. It's basically the exact same footprint. So the only difference would be now we're going to have to maintain the lights as well if we were to put lights in there. So we'd have that ongoing, annual maintenance of a signal versus if you build a roundabout, and you build it with concrete, it's going to be there a long time and we're going to have minimal efforts for maintenance. So that's why we stuck with the roundabout versus going with the signal at that time. And again, the impacts to the ditch, I mean, they were huge. When we found wetlands in there, they found steelhead in the ditch, 4 to 6 inches long, some of them. And that really kicked us into having to find mitigation efforts. We looked all over Stayton. We looked outside Stayton, and we just, the best place we found is in our own backyard at Mill Creek Park. And that's what he's showing you here. Go ahead, Caleb.
Great. Yeah, thank you. The option we've identified as the best place for a mitigation project is up here at Mill Creek on the north end of town. Some of you may know Lance has some plans for a future park here at this location. So the Mill Creek actually runs through on the east side of the park, and there's an opportunity there to improve Mill Creek, add actually a side channel, so you'd end up with 2 parallel channels, thereby increasing the amount of space for fish habitat. So this is what we met with the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife with on site probably 2 months ago or so. We talked through the challenges with this project, and they agreed that this would be a good permittable project that would meet the intent of the fish mitigation requirements. Let's see. So with that, our path forward, next steps. These are the different agencies that will need to be involved in the permitting process. So we've got the Department of State Lands, the Army Corps of Engineers, DEQ, National Marine Fisheries Service, and Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. So each one of these has kind of their own permitting process. Some of them can run concurrently. But it's a process that we're hoping to get started here pretty soon to get the project.
Yeah, and a lot of these we can get the permits from, or we get the verbal okay, and they will give us an approval on the condition that, and they won't have us. We won't need to go out and build it. Like we wouldn't have to build the parallel ditch down at Mill Creek Park until we start building the roundabout itself. So once we go out and we look for funds and we get funds for the roundabout, these costs for these will also be shown on that. And so once we get those funds, it'll be just one big project. We'll do the mitigation effort and the roundabout at the same time.
Councilor Patty?
Yes, Councilor Orr, go ahead.
Can I just make sure that I understood you, Lance? So this fish habitat mitigation can be, because we have to do it for the roundabout, we could possibly use funds for that if we get grant funds?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a total package when we're looking at this. We're filling the stormwater ditch, we're filling the ditch, and that's part of the roundabout project. So it's part of the project. Okay. And so what I'm saying is that a lot of times you may have to go and do the mitigation before you start any kind of construction or before they give you a permit. Mm-hmm. This will allow us to do it simultaneously with the construction of the roundabout.
Oh, cool. Okay.
We'll get the go ahead and get it with the condition that we build it at the same time as the roundabout.
Okay. Thank you.
That was my point. I'm sorry if that was confusing.
No, you're good. Thank you.
Lance, I have kind of a gee whiz question real quick. This is Counselor Patty, by the way. I'm just kind of curious, does our efforts to mitigate the loss of this fish habitat open us up to any new federal dollars or anything like that to assist with funding some kind of project like that?
I don't know. I'd have to check into it more. I would really talk to Pacific Habitat Services. They're our environmental consultant. They have a lot. They've got 50, 60 years of experience in this realm, in this area. I'd have to reach out to them and see if there is. I imagine there probably is, just like any other area of expertise. We just have to dive into it further. And we really, as Caleb said, we just met with Department of Fish and Wildlife. February, was it, Caleb? Something like that, where we finally got them to agree to our project. We walked that site with them, and they thought it was positive. Caleb went back and designed this plan, and he sent it to them for an initial buy-off. They have done that, so now we're preparing the actual application. The application is a process. We've got to go before their board to get it approved, and that can be a 6 to 8 month process because they only meet twice a year. And so, it's just one thing after another we're faced with to get this thing approved. I think I feel real comfortable with where we're at now, that we're on solid footing. We know where we have to go. We know what we have to do. It's just a timeline thing. And that's what we're here to share with you tonight.
And I'll also add, two things. One, it helps tell the story. I think if you're saying, as part of this project, we're going to take a ditch and we're going to create that has fish in it, and we're going to create this beautiful asset, that helps sell the story a little bit. And having this figured out really helps us get further along with grants. But, I've certainly seen a lot of grants where we don't know. And then there's questions of like, well, there's wetlands and there's all this uncertainty. By saying we know exactly what we're in for, and we've got the solutions already figured out, and we've got it basically permitted, that helps relieve a lot of that uncertainty that gets in the way of people wanting to fund projects. So, yeah.
Thank you. And Lance, I just want to say thank you for your work on this, moving it forward. Absolutely. Anybody else have any questions at this point?
Counselor Patty?
Yes, go ahead, Counselor Chilio.
Hi, Lance. Great presentation. I think it's awesome. I'm just going to have some just a number of questions I'm just kind of curious about, and it's really just my own curiosity. So, what is when you guys did comparisons in terms of like the total construction cost for like a traffic signal versus a roundabout, what were the differences? Were there any differences in terms of like the initial cost of that project?
They actually came out to be within like $100,000 of each other, if not closer to that. Caleb, can you refresh me on that? Because I've asked these. Trust me, when we're going through this process, I am sharpening my pencil along the way and asking these guys all the time for that comparison. And I think they've given it to me 2 or 3 times over the last 2 years. Caleb, can you refresh my memory on that?
Yeah. The 2 options were close enough in cost that the difference was nearly negligible.
That's because the footprint's the footprint.
Yeah.
And Lance, I think the issue, and I asked these questions when I first started too, it's not just a simple like stick a traffic signal up in the middle of the intersection. Because of the way the intersection is currently configured, it's a little bit misaligned.
Yeah.
And so in order to do it right, have the proper turn lanes and all of those things, and that's what contributes to that footprint being roughly the same.
That's absolutely correct. If you look, several years ago, we had our city engineer do an alignment of Wilco Road to Golf Club, and we were initially looking at the widening of Wilco Road, and there is a huge angle point there right at that intersection. And so if you have traffic going northbound at 40 miles an hour, you have to make the intersection designed and flow through at 40 miles an hour, much like a roundabout, or if you had a traffic signal there. So we would be pushing that whole intersection west. And in doing so, it expands the footprint. And if we were just paying for it ourselves, it would be one thing, but we don't have the money to do that ourselves. number two is that once we start inviting others to ask for money from others and give us grants and so forth, we open ourselves up to other things we need to look at, i.e. wetlands. Wetlands was a huge disaster for us, really. I mean, they usually are significant, but in this case, that prompted us to go and shock the ditch to see if there were any critters in there, and there just happened to be steelhead. And so that opens up another Pandora's box. And so we're trying to make our way through this process and go through the protocols so we can finally get a shovel-ready plans. And I really think we're real close. It's just a matter now. We know what we have to do. We know what's behind each one of these doors, and we know how to address it. And now it's just putting it into action and going forward. And with that, if you have anything else, David, our counselor, I'll be happy to answer your questions.
No, I think I'm good.
Okay.
Any other questions for Lance? Or Caleb?
Were you finished, Caleb?
Yeah, I was done. I think this last slide is pretty self-explanatory.
I asked Caleb to try to keep it to 15 to 20 minutes, and I apologize it went a little longer, but it's a lot of information, and I think, I every time I get into a conversation about this, and I get into them quite a bit, and I understand it's money, and it's a lot of money, but if you want to open up that industrial area, if you have any hope of opening up the industrial area for development, this needs to occur. Otherwise, it's just vacant land that's going to sit out there until you retire, counselor, because you won't be able to develop it. And so that's why we're pressing hard on this to try to get funds for it and to construct it. And with that, that's it.
Oh,
Councilor Ort, do you have a question for Lance before he finishes here? Thank you.
I rubbed my eye now. Forgive me. I had a question about like the apartments that are being constructed. Are any of those like SCT funds? Am I saying that right? I'm sorry. I'm really distracted by my eye. Do they have to contribute anything to the roundabout?
Yes, it's a matter of, well, it's not particularly just the roundabout, it's the SDC funds themselves. And I think Dan and I just calculated what they're going to have to contribute for that. And I don't have those numbers, but they're going to be, well, it's a significant number, what I'll say, all the SDCs. I won't get into the exact number here, but if you'd like to call and we can talk about that, but it's a significant number for all the SDCs, and any development that occurs in Stayton will be paying, it pays SDC fees, and they go into projects just like this. And so we'll be using SDC funds, we'll be using any kind of grant funds. Hopefully we can get Marion County to kick in a few dollars, and we'll get it built, but we got to get it designed first, and that's what we're after.
Awesome. Thank you, Lance.
Thanks, Caleb.
Thank you, Lance.
Okay.
Thank you all for your time.
Yeah, thank you, Caleb. Next item on the agenda, if you allow me to turn to that, is actually going to be a public hearing. This is going to be on ordinance number 1061. It's going to be a comprehensive plan zone map amendment for the Stayton Vet Clinic. And prior to, I got a script to read. So if you allow me a moment real quick. Good evening. My name is David Patty. I am Stayton City Council's council president. Woof. Got to fix that. And I will be presiding over this hearing. This is the time and place set for the City Council's public hearing in the matter of land use file number 2-02/23, applications for a comprehensive plan map amendment and a zone map amendment to change the property at 190 East Pine Street from a comprehensive plan map designation of residential to commercial and a zone change from medium density residential to commercial general. This hearing is now open. Oregon land use law requires that a statement be made to those in attendance that covers certain matters relative to this case. That statement, with all the information required to be presented under ORS 197.763, Section 5, is printed and available at the table at the entrance of the hearing room. If you have not yet received one of these forms, you should go get one and review it prior to presenting your testimony. If anyone has any questions regarding anything on the statement, or objects to it not being read out loud, please raise those questions when it comes to your turn to speak during the hearing. Also at the back corner is the agenda for this evening's meeting, which lays out the order in which people will be called on to speak during the public hearing. The Planning Commission's rules of procedure for land use public hearings and a brochure written to facilitate your participation in the public hearing. You are encouraged to obtain and read a copy of these documents as well. At this time, I would ask the audience if there are any objections to the notice that was sent in this case. I hear none. To the jurisdiction of this body to hear and consider this case. I hear none. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest, ex parte contact, or bias by any members of this body? All right. I have one on May 2nd. I definitely drove by this property and looked over at it prior to reviewing tonight's council agenda. So I just wanted to clear that real quick. Any others? Okay. And then Councilor Sims also drove by and took a look at it. Any other declarations? All right. We are now ready for the staff introduction.
Thank you, Councilor Patty, members of the council, members of the public. Just as a matter of brief introduction, as the opening statement said, this is an application for a comprehensive plan amendment from commercial to residential and an accompanying zone map amendment from medium density residential to commercial general. There is not at this time an application for development activity. There is no, obviously this is being done in preparation for that application to be submitted sometime in the future, but we are not reviewing a development proposal tonight. We are looking merely at changing the color on the zoning map that will facilitate that in the future, but we don't have any specifics about exactly what will be taking place as a result of the actions you may or may not take tonight. Whatever testimony you may hear, and I don't think we'll hear any testimony other than from the applicant as I look around the hearing room, but need to keep that in mind that we're not talking about a development proposal, we're talking about a zone change. So with that, I will vacate the speaker's table, turn it over to the applicant, and then I'll be back to go through the staff report.
Good evening. My name's Tracy Brown. I'm a planning consultant, been hired by Mike Sullivan and Mike Reynolds. For some reason, I bet your name is Sullivan. Mike Reynolds, who is one of the owners of the vet hospital with Jeff Brubaker. So as Dan mentioned, this is a request to change the comprehensive plan and zoning map for the property. And the property is located at 190 East Pine Street, right at the corner of Pine and 2nd Street. There's currently a home on the property there. So the property is about 0.29 acres. The change would be from medium density residential and a comp plan amendment or a comp plan designation of residential to commercial general and a plan amendment or a plan designation of commercial. The reason for the request, as Dan alluded to, is this would be the first step to allow the Stayton Veterinary Hospital, which is located directly south of this property, to expand. And this property is really the best location to allow that to expand because there's a platted alley between what is currently the parking lot and the hospital. And so this would allow that expansion to be contiguous to the north. So currently, the property on the south where the hospital is, as well as those properties on First to the west are all zoned the commercial zoning. And so this is the only property right at that north corner that doesn't have that commercial zoning. So the property is well served by existing public utilities. There's also a good transportation system. And as part of that, our application for review, the applicant hired Art Engineering, who looked at a traffic analysis letter. And in that, they determined that, the change could result in significant impacts, but they are proposing a trip cap of 200 daily trips be imposed as a condition with the zone change. And I see that Mike Art is available here if there's any questions about his analysis and what the trip cap would mean and things like that. In my staff, or in my, sorry, I say staff report, I used to be the planning director for the city of Sandy, so now been a consultant for the last 6 years, but I use those terms interchangeably. Applicant's narrative, we reviewed basically the 7 criteria that are required for comprehensive plan amendments, and these criteria are very, very similar to the criteria for the zoning map amendment. So first of all, we need to look at to make sure that the amendment is consistent with the goals and policies of the comprehensive plan and also the statewide planning goals. We did look at those. We looked at the transportation goals, public facilities, housing, economy, and the land use goals, as well as the statewide planning goals, and found that the proposal will be in compliance with all of these goals and policies. One of the, key ones would be that this would help to facilitate the expansion of this, thriving business in the community. So without the change, it would be very difficult for them to do that expansion. The next criteria we looked at would make sure that the comprehensive plan does not provide adequate areas and appropriate locations for the allowed use. And as mentioned, this is the best and probably key location for the expansion, and it's really the only reasonable and cost-effective location to expand their facility. The third criteria we looked at had to do with demonstrating that it complies with statewide planning goals, and we looked at the applicable goals and found that it did comply with those goals, and so that criterion is satisfied. We need to make sure that the existing or anticipated transportation facilities are adequate. And that's where we had Mike Art of Art Engineering look at that. And he proposes a trip cap of 200 average daily trips be conditioned on this proposed amendment. And that the next criteria has to do with the comprehensive plan provides more than projected need for lands and the existing land use designation. So we needed to look at, with this change from residential to commercial, would the city still have adequate residential lands for the anticipated needs of the city? And the city has a pretty large excess capacity, and Dan will probably go into some of those numbers. It's roughly in the 900 acre amount to meet the projected demand within the urban growth boundary. So this 0.29 acre change would have minimal effect on the buildable lands and meeting those projected demand for residential lands. We need to make sure that public facilities and services are adequate. And so we did receive, and in your packet, there's a comment from the city engineer. He has noted an issue of the downstream sewer capacity, and the applicant's aware of that. And that it sounds like the city is working on that to resolve that problem. And so that would just be something that would have to be resolved prior to the development of the site. It shouldn't hold up changing the zoning on the property or the comprehensive plan amendment. And the final criteria we looked at is the use will not significantly adversely affect existing or planned uses on adjacent lands. And you may have seen in your packet that there was a public testimony at the Planning Commission, as well as a what we call a petition by an adjacent property owner had some concerns about the proposed change. After the meeting, the applicant discussed with them, and actually the author of that petition didn't realize that the veterinary clinic also owned these other properties on North First, and those properties would be used as part of a larger development to provide additional parking for the redevelopment of the site. The concern had to do with taking up on-street parking in front of residences in the neighborhood. And so with the change, the comprehensive plan change and the development will help to resolve that problem for the neighborhood. So with that, we found that it does comply with the 7 required criteria, and those are very similar to the criteria for zoning map amendments. And with that, we're requesting that the city council approve the application. So I just asked Mike to say a few words. If you have any questions for him.
I'm Mike Reynolds, now Mike Sullivan. That's okay. This is the first time we've met too, so it's fine. We email. My partner and I, Jeff Brubaker, we are the owners of Stayton Veterinary Hospital. There is a high demand for veterinary services. We are at maximum capacity almost every day, just running into each other. We have about 50 employees. We're not obviously all there every day, but it's crowded in there. And we have, at least from our side, we've got some exciting things that we'd like to bring to the community, and we can't do it in the existing facility, which isn't that old, obviously, but we need more room, which is nice problem to have, but we would like to create an area where we can provide more services, our clients can be more comfortable, but also our employees can be more comfortable just in a working environment. And I think that we can do some things to beautify Stayton. That's not an attractive area right now, those 3 lots. I know we're talking about 1, but the 2 in front of it are in particularly, they're in disrepair. So I think we can do some things to make Stayton look a little nicer.
Yeah, I guess with that, I don't know if you have any questions for us and or Mike Ard, traffic consultant on the project.
Thank you so much. We do have one question here from Councilor Ord.
Thank you. So maybe this is a question for Michael on Zoom, but like having a cap of 200 trips daily, does that mean, or maybe it's for you too, Mike, but does that mean like limiting appointments during the day to make sure that, or what is, okay, let me go back. What is this? And how do you make sure that you don't go over 200 trips a day out of the business?
Let Mike address this.
That's definitely a question for me. So as we did the traffic impact study for the proposed zone change, the context of that is that you guys have a city document, the city's transportation system plan, that looks at how much traffic you're expecting to see 20 years into the future and contemplates what facilities are needed and what funding is needed to respond to those increases in traffic that are projected. And when we do a zone change, there's always the chance that the increased traffic resulting from the zone change is going to create things that you didn't anticipate.
Mike?
He muted himself.
We lost you. We can't hear what you're saying.
I think he accidentally muted himself because it looks like his.
There you go.
I think I'm unmuted again. I don't know how much you missed there. But basically, the document that I prepared is trying to make sure that we don't create problems with your transportation system plan as it's adopted, or if we do create problems, that we provide some way to mitigate that. When we do the analysis, we depend on data resources that have been developed across the country that tell us for any particular type of land use, how many trips are expected to be seen during the morning peak hour, during the evening peak hour, and throughout the day. And that comes in the form of some manuals, and I'll show you just one volume. is, and it contains a variety of uses that, see if I can flip to the table of contents here, you can kind of see the listing there of water parks, soccer complexes, tennis courts. This is recreational stuff, but you can see at the bottom it's getting into charter schools. And so we have basically almost every conceivable land use that you can think of, one of which is a veterinary office that we've documented what the typical trips are, and we relate that to the size of the facilities. So as we looked at this site, we looked at how big of a facility might be built within the footprint of the land that's being subject to the rezone. We tried to figure out how many trips that would generate based on book values, and then made sure that we set our trip cap high enough that it would accommodate that use, but it maybe wouldn't accommodate a convenience store or a fast food restaurant or some of the other uses that are allowed in the commercial zone that we're changing this to. So we're limiting the increase in traffic to just what we need in order to accomplish what the landowner wants to do with the property. Now, with respect to how that's measured, we typically do not go out in the field with counters and verify somebody doesn't see more than X number of trips. Rather, it is that exercise of looking material up in the book at the time of land use approval. So when the proposed building comes in with an application, it will have a footprint associated with it. It will have land use types associated with it, and we'll be able to look up in the books what the projected trip numbers are, compare that to the trip, and it either complies or it doesn't. And if it doesn't comply, then it needs to be scaled back, and if it does comply, then it's approvable under the trip cap. So that keeps things relatively simple for you guys to manage, because it means that you're only doing something once on the property, and it also gives that surety that we're not going to do anything that's crazy and is going to create problems for you in the long term, at least without having to come back and do another similar land use process where we would remove the trip cap and contemplate doing mitigation for additional traffic impacts. So I hope that answers your question. A little verbose, I guess.
That was very helpful. Thank you.
And I might add to that at the time of development, there's likely to be a traffic study included to look at site distance and some things like that, where the access points would be. So the trip cap is kind of its own entity for the purposes of this change zone amendment. But there will be additional looking at the traffic parameters at the time of development.
Correct.
Follow up, Councilor Ward.
I had a different question, unless anyone else has a question. Go ahead.
Okay, so we'll start with Councilor Sims. Go ahead.
So going back to the parking issue, I think on Hollister and Pine is what I saw on the paperwork. So where you're probably going to have some additional employees. I mean, where are you going to have a parking lot put in for employees on the property, or how are you going to mitigate the parking issue?
So the two lots that are on First Street, 1330, 1336, which are adjacent to our current parking lot, we would anticipate being entirely turned into parking.
Okay, that's what I was getting at. Okay, thank you.
Councilor McDonald, go ahead.
Thanks, Councilor Patty. One, I guess I should probably declare that I'm a frequent customer of the Stayton Veterinary Hospital. I've given many of my dollars to have them take very, very good care of my animals. So I won't let that affect my decision, but I can definitely attest to the need for their expansion. They are definitely slammed almost all the time, and sometimes it's tough to get an appointment in there. So I just wanted to get basically a vision of this. Basically, what you're talking about. I realize we don't have an actual proposal in front of us, but the idea is to add both structural building space and parking space to that whole block in perpetuity to give you more space to do everything.
Yep.
Okay.
Most likely, I guess is the existing building would be expanded onto this new lot. So we would consolidate these two properties into one lot, and then the parking would be on the other side of the alley.
And the existing structures that are there would probably be gotten rid of. Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Councilor Ward, go ahead.
It kind of piggybacks off of Councilor Sim's question. So you said that you did speak with the people that had concerns around the building.
I did not. Jeff was here at the last meeting.
Okay.
And he did after the meeting.
Okay.
And they were not aware that we also had acquired the other 2 lots, and we were planning on putting in parking. So
Okay.
there's, I understand their concerns. We really do want to be good neighbors. We're not, we ask the employees they don't park silly, because some of our employees are young and they don't appreciate that people might want to not have you parked right in front of their house. So we're working on that right now, actually. Like right now, they're all parking on these lots as much as they can. But after the meeting, Jeff and I don't remember the gentleman's name, spoke. And he said, yeah, I didn't know that you had acquired those lots. He said, if that's going to be parking, that's great.
Okay.
That was the impression that I got. And I think Dan got a little bit of that as well. But like I said, the goal is to be good to our neighbors. We don't want anybody unhappy. And so we would hope there's going to be enough parking that this is going to really, really change things in a big way. And it's not fun to buy property and put a parking lot on it, but it's necessary. So.
Thank you.
It seems like the intent of the expansion is not to necessarily increase the number of employees. It's to provide better services and more space. And so those employees will then be able to park on site in the future.
Yeah, that's well said. The size of the facility, say, might double, would be the goal, but the number of employees will not even come close to that. We could double the space now and be fine with basically the number of employees we have now. So I don't anticipate a massive increase in staff numbers.
Just not more than 200 trips, if I'm interpreting this correctly. Right. Okay, great. Okay. Do we have any other questions for the applicant? Okay. If we don't have any more questions, I think we'll have you back a little bit later here.
Okay. Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is going to be the staff report for this public hearing.
Thank you. And I'm going to go a little bit out of order from what I intended to follow up on the conversation about the trip cap. If you look at page 35 of your packet, you'll see what's called a trip generation calculation worksheet. And going back to what Mr. Ard said about going to the traffic generation manual, you're looking up, okay, animal hospital / veterinary clinic is expected to generate 21.5 trips per 1,000 square feet of floor area. So what this is showing is with an 8,000 square foot addition, they would be generating an average daily traffic of 172 trips. So again, nobody will be out there counting before and after, but we will use this 21.5 trips per 1,000 square feet as the cap for how many square feet can be built to stay under the 200 trip per day cap, assuming that you place that cap on, assuming that you approve it with the cap in place.
Thank you. That made sense when he explained it too, that I was thinking of it the opposite way of what the intentions are. So
Right.
Thank you.
And also, next month, you'll have a very similar application in front of you. And for those of you who have been on the council for a while, and it might be long enough ago that maybe, I don't know, it might not be anybody, but when we brought the Hillier Ford property into the city, we also placed a trip cap on that. So I guess that must have been at least when the two of you were on, because I'm seeing nods.
That was actually our first one, I think.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's see. What was I going to say? I'll just say again, this is just the comprehensive plan and zone map amendment. When Stayton Veterinary Hospital is ready to proceed, they will have to go through a site plan review process. We will have the traffic engineering, the stormwater analysis, the detailed plans and all of that. But tonight, we're just talking about essentially opening the door to allow that to happen by changing the comprehensive plan designation and the zone map amendment. You've got in front of you all of the materials that they've submitted. You've got on pages 38 or so to 45, the starting on page 41 of your packet, the planning commissions from 41 to 48, the planning commissions unanimously approved order recommending that you approve this. Their analysis, which is copied and pasted into my suggested analysis for you, because actually we don't have any additional information on the record. But I do, as noted in my staff memorandum, there are three criteria for approval that I just want to bring to your attention, make sure you're aware of as you go through your decision-making process. And we've kind of talked about them a bit in the applicant's presentation and in my initial remarks here. First is the trip cap and the TPR. And the other thing I want to say, just to make sure you understand this whole process. So it's not specific to this application, but it'll be before you every time you have a comprehensive plan or zone map amendment. What we call this TPR, the Transportation Planning Rule, is a rule adopted by the state, so it has the weight of law. And it says, as Mike explained, when someone applies for us to change our zoning, or actually when we do it ourselves as well, we need to make sure that that's not going to have an adverse impact on our transportation system, as even with the planned improvements that we have in our TPR. What the rule says is that we don't listen to what the applicant says they want to do. The applicant may come and go after we change the zoning map. We have to look at the, quote, worst case scenario of what could happen under the proposed zoning and compare that to the, quote, worst case scenario under the current zoning. So if you took the time to read through the transportation planning rule analysis that had those trip generation calculation worksheets appended to it, you'll see that's what Mike Ard did. And he concluded that if you change the zoning to commercial general and Dark Horse Enterprises decides not to pursue the expansion of the vet clinic, and someone else comes along and buys this property, as far as traffic is concerned, the worst case scenario would be a 3,100 square foot convenience store, a Circle K or a 7-Eleven or whatever, coming in, and that could generate 2,400 trips. And the conclusion was, well, that could have an adverse impact on the transportation system, hence the trip cap. So again, the analysis isn't what is the applicant planning to do, because we're not doing a development review here. We're just changing the color on the zoning map. What's the worst case that could happen as a result of this? Secondly, the second criteria for approval, again, was mentioned in the applicant's presentation. You need to find that there are adequate utility facilities in the area for the property. And while today, essentially the pipes in front of this property are adequately sized to handle what's there now and what's likely to be proposed, this area does essentially drain down to West Ida Street, where we know we have capacity problems. And so We're working on, we're working on solving those problems, but the timing may be that when they come back for site plan review, then we will have to do this analysis of have we fixed enough of the problem to that there's adequate capacity at this location. So again, they're on notice that might be an issue depending on how quickly they come back. Finally, and there was some questions, and I understand about the public testimony, about the impact of the zone change on the neighborhood. Again, because this goes back a few years, I just want to make sure you understand that prior to 2018, this area was zoned commercial. The whole section between along North 2nd Ave and North 3rd Ave, north of the elementary school and school district offices, up into up to Fir Street was zoned commercial general. It was exclusively exclusively residential use, almost all single-family detached homes. There were several neighborhoods in the city that were like that. They were residential use, zoned commercial. The city was hearing from property owners and realtors that combination, that those existing single-family homes were non-conforming uses. That meant banks were hesitant to issue mortgages on them because they weren't in conformance with the zoning. There was the thought that, it's hard enough to stay in business on First Ave. Who in their right mind is going to open a business on the west side of North 3rd Ave? So the city actually initiated the zone map amendment, comprehensive plan map amendment for this area, for West Washington Street, the first couple blocks of West Washington Street, where a couple years before someone had come in and applied for a zone change from commercial to residential so they could partition property, and that's where the two buildings that the school district high school kids built on West Washington. There was an older house there that was on a large lot. It's torn down, partitioned. The school built the two new homes. And the third location was out west Ida on like Myrtle, Noble, Oak streets between Ida and West Washington. So anyway, I'm just saying that I'm bringing you that background so you understand that that's how we got into this situation. When we made those changes, I believe the vet clinic had been approved by the Planning Commission, but not yet constructed. So that lot stayed commercial, and the rest around it was zoned residential. And here we are today. They have bought what was a rental house with the idea of expanding the clinic. I believe that I know Councilor Giglio had asked about what the result, how the Planning Commission dealt with the testimony. It is dealt with just by, you can see in the Planning Commission's findings, but I think the fact that there is nobody in the hearing room tonight indicates that those concerns have been met. I'll say I ran into Mr. Ross last Friday. He didn't say anything, as we chatted. Generally, he didn't say anything about tonight's proceedings or the Planning Commission meeting to me. And so I think that the fact that no one is here tonight, you can take as a sign that their concerns have been addressed. So with that, I will wrap up. You've got a draft ordinance in front of you with complete findings, addressing all of the criteria. If you've got any questions for me, I'll do my best to answer them. And while I don't think there's anybody in the room, the next would be opening it up for testimony from the public.
Thank you, Dan. Anybody have any questions for Dan at this time? Okay. All right. Dan, I have a quick one, and it's kind of a hypothetical. So one of the not annexation, but one of our criteria that we're looking at here is the transportation aspect of this, best I can tell. Hypothetical question is the different issues that are lined out in the public submission here. Are we allowed to consider that at this time into making our decision?
Yes, you are. But I would suggest that the issues that they have raised in their March 20th letter are not directed to the criteria about impacts on the transportation system. They're not about the capacity of the roads. They're really about the behavior of the staff and the customers of the clinic. They are about parking management. And also, I think they are more properly addressed when they come in with a site plan review application to actually do the development. Because again, they're not about traffic generation and the capacity of the street system. They're about how do we manage customers and staff where they park for work or bringing in their stock trailers to get their livestock examined and treated.
Thank you for articulating that. It's helpful for us to manage expectations for folks when we receive information like this as to what we can consider and what we cannot. So I appreciate you expanding upon that, and that's helpful for me. Any other questions for Dan? Okay, terrific. Next, we will hear proponents' testimony. Do we have any proponents in the room who would like to testify? Okay. Do we have any opponents' testimony this evening for this application? All right, hearing none. Is there anyone who has neutral or other testimony? Not sure what distinguishes neutral or other, but okay, cool. No, that's fine, Counselor. Or questions from the council is next. Go ahead.
The surrounding residents are alerted to this meeting, correct? I guess I assume that they were for land use.
The property owners.
Yes.
To distinguish from residents.
Sure.
The property owners receive notice of the Planning Commission hearing at least 20 days in advance. A sign was posted 10 days in advance of the Planning Commission hearing. The sign actually stayed up for the past 2 months, but was reloaded with new flyers for tonight's hearing. And a second written notice went out, I don't remember exactly when, but it was at least 10 days ago, because that's the requirement for the second hearing. So a notice was mailed for tonight's hearing, again, to all of the owners of property within a 300-foot radius of the subject property.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions from council? All right. Hearing none, we'll go ahead and move to the applicant's summary, please.
Tracy Brown, planning consultant. Yeah, we don't have a lot to add except, as it was stated in our presentation previously, and I think analyzed by the city planner, the proposal complies with the various criteria that are required to approve it. And, some of the issues that were mentioned in terms of parking management, we feel that those would be readily resolved. They're currently working on solutions in the interim until they can redevelop the properties and, provide some nice adequate parking. It's one of those, parking is one of those things that you want your prime parking spots available for your customers and clients. You don't want your staff taking up those spots. So it may be good in the future to have designated spots for the staff in one location and the clients in another location so that you're not mixing those two groups up. But we feel like, with this zone change and comprehensive plan amendment, that would go a long way toward, helping the business to expand as well as resolving some of the issues in that neighborhood. So I guess with that, we request that you approve the application.
Well, thank you so much, Tracy. I appreciate that. Any questions real quick for the applicant? Okay. Guess we'll move back to Dan. Thank you so much.
I don't have anything really to add other than to point out that you've got the draft ordinance at the end of the packet, to point out that section 3 of the ordinance on page 56 of the packet includes the trip cap. And the staff report gives you 6 options: to approve the ordinance as presented, to approve it with modifications, to deny the application, which will mean rewriting the findings and conclusions, continue the hearing till your next meeting, close the hearing, keep the record open, close the hearing, and continue your deliberations till your next meeting. The staff recommendation and the recommendation from the Planning Commission is to adopt Ordinance 1061 as presented.
Well, thank you, Dan. Any clarifying questions for Dan? Okay. I'm going to go ahead and close the hearing in that case. Next is going to be council deliberation. How's everybody feel about this one?
I think my concerns were answered. I'm good with the ordinance.
Yep. Sounds good. Thank you, Councilor Sims. Anybody else offering?
Yeah, I also don't have any further concerns about the ordinance. I'm ready to approve.
Thank you, Councilor McDonald. Councilors?
Same. Yep.
Okay, cool. All right. With that, I'll entertain a motion for council decision on ordinance number 1061.
Yeah, Councilor Patty, this is Councilor McDonald. I would like to move to approve the application and first consideration of ordinance 1061 as presented.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second to approve the application and first consideration of ordinance 1061. Tammy, would you go ahead and just poll the council?
Counselor Giglio?
Aye.
Counselor Ort?
Yes.
Counselor McDonald?
Yes.
Counselor Sims?
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
I was going to be a yes too,
okay, Counselor Patty.
but thanks for asking.
Motion passes 5-0.
All right. On that, I have a quick closure statement to read. So the council's action may be appealed within 21 days of the mailing of the notice of decision to the Land Use Board of Appeals under ORS 197.805-855. Thank you. Okay. Next, we're going to go ahead and get a city manager update and get some announcements.
Yes. So first of all, just a point of clarification. I believe that the reason why Tammy did not poll Councilor Patty is because he is presiding over the council. And as council president, I believe he doesn't have a vote unless there's a tie. That's my recollection of what the charter says when you are presiding over the council. If I'm wrong, we can.
No, I think you're right.
Okay.
Let's go with that.
Okay. So that is why we did not. So just wanted to clarify that. You should have all seen an email come out from me this morning. It was very close to afternoon, but it was not yet noon, so I'm very happy about that. We released the budget. It is available online, and we have copies. We did not bring them with us. I'm not quite sure why, but we were focused on getting other things here. But we have copies available at the City Hall for you to pick up. Happy to answer any questions that council may have or the budget committee may have in the interim. We're hoping to get questions, any like burning questions in advance so that staff has time to think about them, prepare prepare an answer by Sunday so that we can get you something for our presentations on Monday if possible. Obviously, if you have questions during the meeting, you can ask them. I wanted to mention that this week is Police Week, and next week is Public Works Week. So both Chief Johns and Lance will be doing things for their staff. We'll be having Facebook recognition of the departments throughout the week. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. So shout out to our amazing staff who do amazing work on a regular basis. And then Gwen, I'm going to ask you to come up, Chief Johns, come up, and I've asked her to talk to you about, I think you guys know that she'll be in Germany this summer doing something pretty amazing. And so I asked her to share a little bit about that with council as well as anybody that might be viewing at home, just to kind of, it's very exciting what she's able to do. And it's kind of I think a feather in Stayton's cap.
So I've been talking to Julia for, it's pretty exciting for me to see. I volunteered for Special Olympics Oregon for almost 30 years now, and in that time I do torch run, but I also do other events where we work in with the athletes and the Special Olympics staff. We do things like the torch run, but also hand out medals at competitions and events with the athletes. This year is a Special Olympics athlete from for a team that will run the torch across 16 communities. This is my team here. It's a German law enforcement officer. As we saw, pretty varied backgrounds, and they're law enforcement personnel. That can be anything from dispatch, corrections, national police, full gamut falls under law enforcement. But these are all people that have volunteered pretty extensively over the years for Special Olympics. We will be part of about 100 law enforcement officers around the world, running across Germany. We'll be up early in the morning, probably on the bus at 7 a.m. We get off and we run. We then do a ceremony, we speak, and then back on the bus between 3 and 4 nights. Probably back to the hotel at 10 o'clock at night. So long days, but very worthwhile. And it's about spreading the word about Special Olympics, about, and then obviously champions for that are so amazing. But this is amazing opportunity on and then also using that as a platform for fundraising session as well. But the unique thing too, Special Olympics for me has been really huge in my life. And I've just found where it's expanded my network. So some of the people I've had for our promotional processes or people I've met on state Special Olympics. Corvallis come help, and we had a sergeant for Portland, and those people I've met in the Special Olympics world. So there is a professional capacity to it as well. But I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this and share.
So, and I asked Gwen to share that in more detail. I think we've mentioned it before. And I know she's got a flyer with she is raising funds for Special Olympics, but it's just exciting. It's exciting really, in the state. I don't know if there's anybody else that is running, the state of Oregon, and we have someone from Stayton that's doing this with, it's just really, it's pretty cool. And I'm really proud. I'm proud of her, and I want to tout it as much as we can. Do you have questions for Chief Johns?
I do. I'll wait for you to go back, though. No, I was just curious, how far do you got to run altogether yourself?
Can you turn your microphone on or speak more into it? Sorry.
So as a rookie officer, I got invited to do a torch run, and ever since then I've been involved. And then also first or second year as a police officer, a sergeant asked me to hand out medals at a track competition. And kind of once you do that, it's all the hugs and high fives and just amazing. And Newburgh had the summer games for quite a few years, and then that was a great opportunity just kind of to grow my involvement and my experience. So I do serve on the state law enforcement torch run council, and then just neat memories and neat bonds, and
Thank you.
Yeah,
Good
thank
luck.
you.
I know you'll make us proud out there.
Thanks.
Councilor Patty.
Joe.
Yeah, I just wanted to also say I think it's pretty amazing. My son has 2 and he's some disabilities, and it's just such an amazing community, such an amazing thing to be a part of. And I'm proud that we're sending you, and thank you for your involvement in that community. Just so important.
Thank you. Yeah, one of my favorite memories is at a summer games. We had a U.S. Marshal show up, and he's a muscly big dude with tats and full beard and just looks tough. And he hadn't done this before, and we knew the one athlete that was getting a medal was a big hugger. So we're like, Marshall gets him. And this athlete grabbed the Marshal in a bear hug, lifted him off the ground, and he was so excited and so happy. He was literally shaking him up and down. And we thought, oh no, we're not sure how this is going. And when the Marshal got back on his feet, he's like, this is awesome. I will be back. But, in law enforcement, we talk about wellness for our officers, and to me, you don't leave an event without joy and happiness, and like I say, the high fives and the hugs and the smiles. And so for me, it's always been that rejuvenation and definitely a wellness piece to this job.
It's amazing, like the gift that those people bring to the world. Like it's incredible. It's like there's actually this thing called the disability paradox, where it's like if you ask people with like in general disabilities like what their happiness level is, like as opposed to the rest of us, and they're happier. Like it's like this paradox, and it's amazing how they can share that and can actually be like this source of rejuvenation and joy for the rest of us.
Yeah. No, it's been wonderful, and my family's very involved. My boys have run the torch run and done bocce with the athletes and pulled planes. We do a plane pull for Special Olympics, and so polar plunge, all those good things. But it's been good interaction for them as well. Good learning about inclusion and giving back. Thank you.
That's all I have. I'm sure I'll talk about it more as it gets closer to Gwen leaving, and certainly when she comes back to share with you. It's just, I'm excited for her, but I'm also just excited that we have somebody from Stayton that's going to Germany to run in the torch run. I think that's pretty cool. So that's all I've got, unless you have questions for me.
Anybody have questions for Julia? Okay. All right, let's move to, do you have any other? Okay. Do you have any other counselors wishing to communicate something at this time? Okay, hearing nothing, we're going to go ahead and adjourn this evening. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.